Welcome, everybody, to this Daily Fantasy 5 on a beautiful Wednesday. It is June 26th, and this is episode 128. We, as always, are bringing you the 5 things you need to know every day in the world of fantasy sports. Today, we've got a lot going on. We've got an NBA rumor to talk about. We've got an NFL injury, some baseball news, and then we're going to be doing fantasy wide receivers, my top 20 from numbers 9 to 13. So a lot to cover today. Hold on. We'll be right back with all that news after a word from our sponsor, www.mathradio.com. Go to mathradio.com for your kids ages 7 through 17 to pick up an online math course for as little as $9.99 to help them get better grades in school, score higher on exams, and even get into college. That is mathradio.com to be the hero of your household and pick up an online course for $9.99. www.mathradio.com. All right, everybody. Let's start with the fantasy news, and then we'll get to our fantasy wide receivers for today. The big news out of the NBA, kind of the rumor market, is that Butler may be headed to the Rockets in a sign-and trade. I'm not exactly sure how this one would work. They would have to send out 2 of the 3 of Tucker, Gordon, and who's the big guy? Their big center, whatever his name is, right? 2 of those 3 guys to bring back in Butler. I'm not really sure Philadelphia would want to do this. They might want to just fill up cap space, or maybe they flip those guys for a draft pick to somebody else. They would seem to have value. I mean, Tucker and Gordon, they're both good players. Capella, that's his name. Clint Capella is the third option. So, the Rockets are always interesting. They're always willing to do whatever it takes to bring in a superstar. That could be an interesting team. I don't particularly love the fantasy value for Butler going to a Harden-led team. It might make sense from a basketball standpoint, but not really from a fantasy point. So I don't like it. No news that it's imminent. It's just what they want to do. We'll find out more on Sunday when this all goes down. Our second story comes from the NFL. Bengals number 1 draft pick, 11th overall, Jonah Williams, the offensive tackle out of Alabama, has torn something, and he'll be out for the entire season. Oh, my goodness gracious. What do the Bengals have going on this year that's good? I have no idea. But again, I don't like A.J. Green. We mentioned him in my top 20. I had him ranked as let's look it up right now as we talk, my 17th wide receiver, much lower than most people have him. But you know what? I just don't like the Bengals. I don't think he lasts the season. I don't think he lasts the season with the Bengals. Maybe he's traded. Maybe it's a Amari Cooper situation like last year where he goes to a team and just accelerates, and I could be wrong. But this is definitely going to hurt the Bengals. It hurts their quarterback. If you were thinking about, drafting the redhead Andy Dalton as your kind of sleeper quarterback, I would not go that route anymore. It hurts Mixon. It hurts everybody on the team, right? He was supposed to be their cornerstone at left tackle, and he's not going to be there anymore. So not good news for the Bengals. All right, let's go over to baseball. An interesting story out of the Angels. Ohtani, he's the guy from Japan who can pitch and hit. He had Tommy John surgery in the offseason, so he was not expected to pitch in 2019. They're still saying he won't pitch, but he will throw off, or he did throw off a mound for the first time since the surgery yesterday. So that's interesting. I don't think he's going to pitch at the end of the year, but I guess it's possible. He's been batting pretty well, but if you want him as a pitcher-hitter combo, or if you have him in a dynasty league, I guess this is good news for you. Our other piece of baseball news is not so good. White Sox shortstop Tim Anderson has been absolutely killing it this year, but it seems like he has an ankle sprain. Don't know how long he's going to be out yet. X-rays were negative. He'll be reevaluated today. On the season, he's hitting .317 with 11 home runs and 15 stolen bases. Pretty exciting stuff from the White Sox shortstop. Check in tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have more news on the status of Tim Anderson. All right. That's all the fantasy news for today. Let's get into our wide receiver ranking soccer. Again, we're doing wide receivers 13 through 9 today. These are all kind of wide receivers who are on the fringe of being wide receiver ones. I always look at things from a half point per reception format just because that's what I use in FanDuel. That's what I spend most of my time on, is doing, the daily fantasy through FanDuel. And when I think about my rankings, I think about it through that lens. So when I ranked them, I was thinking about a half point per reception. So it's a little meld between a PPR and a standard league. All right, number 13. We left off yesterday with number 14. I have Galladay at number 21, at number 14. And today we're going to have Tyler Lockett. I like Lockett a lot this year. He is my 13th wide receiver. He finished last year as number 14 overall. Lockett had an amazing 2018. season thanks mostly to hauling in 10 touchdown catches. It is odd that while his targets remain the same from 2017 to 2018, his touchdowns jumped from 2 to 10. So that makes me a little bit nervous. And the other thing that gives me pause about drafting Lockett as wide receiver one is the Seattle offense. They simply don't throw the ball very often, right? Unfortunately for Lockett, Doug Baldwin is no longer on the picture, which means he should get a lot more targets, especially in the slot. So you would hope that he would get a lot more targets, a bigger workload, and he only had 70 last year. 10 touchdowns on 70 targets is pretty amazing. I would not expect that touchdown number to jump up, even if the targets go up, but it would certainly raise his floor a lot. We've never seen what Lockett could do with 100 targets over a course of a season. We might get the chance this year, but even if he stays around the 70 to 80 target, area, he should still be a solid wide receiver number two option, but his value as a wide receiver one seems to go out the window. Either way, there's value here. He's being drafted as wide receiver 24, and I think he's a pretty solid option to stay as a top 20 type guy. So I think there's value in Tyler Lockett. All right, number 12 on my list is Diggs. Diggs is the wide receiver out of Minnesota. He's quite a nice player. So the problem is that he's from playing in Minnesota. Last year, he finished as the number 10 wide receiver. He doesn't have the same kind of value as Lockett. He's being drafted at wide receiver 15, so it does hurt him a little bit, but he certainly has a higher upside, and I think he has a little bit of a higher floor too. For example, Diggs had 148 targets last year, which was twice as many as Lockett had. And despite having Thielen on his team, Diggs still found a way to put up great fantasy numbers. He finished the season with over 1,000 yards and 102 receptions. So in PPR formats, Diggs is an absolute beast. I am worried that the Vikings defense and their running game is going to be a little bit better this year, and that will decrease the number of targets that Diggs sees. And he really is a volume play. So if his targets are reduced, the option for him to be a number one wide receiver is going to be greatly diminished as well. I still think he'll get enough targets to be a number two guy, and I don't think there's a risk there. But if you have to draft him as wide receiver 15, you're hoping that he could sneak into the top, the top 12, top 10, and be, a big time guy for you. I'm not really sure he's going to have that kind of year this season. I see him as a very, very late wide receiver one or a very nice wide receiver two. All right, number 11 for me is Keenan Allen out of no longer San Diego, the Los Angeles Chargers. Yeah, whatever. Allen, I have him ranked as number 11. He was number 11 last year. He kind of is what he is at this point. I think he's the most boring wide receiver on this list. You can expect him to grab about 100 receptions and put up 1,200 yards and score 6 touchdowns. The injuries from 2015 and 16 seem to be behind him. And it's just not that fun or sexy to draft Keenan Allen, but he should provide very reliable low-end wide receiver one numbers again in 2019. He's being drafted a little high for my taste at wide receiver 8. So if you are drafting him there, I don't know that he has the upside to be a top 5 to break into that elite category. I guess some people do because he's being drafted at wide receiver 8. So take it for what you will. Keenan Allen, he's not ending up on many of my teams this year simply because he's being drafted a little bit too high for me. I think he's safe. I think he definitely is going to end up as a top 12 wide receiver. I just don't think he can finish in the top 6 or 7. Okay. Let's move on to Adam Thielen. I have him ranked at number 10. He finished at number 7 last year due to a very, very strong start of the season. The biggest difference between Thielen and his teammate Diggs is the yardage. So in 2018, Adam Thielen averaged over 2 yards per catch more than Diggs. Thielen always has averaged pretty big numbers per catch. Last year was actually a down year for him in that regard. While Diggs seems to fluctuate from year to year, he's gone from like 10 to 13 for the past 4 years. So, all the same problems that Diggs faced in Minnesota are there for Adam as well. But I simply believe that Thielen is more talented and can do more with each target. So even if he does get fewer targets like Diggs might get, I think he can still do more, which was why I have him ranked, 2 slots ahead of Diggs? So not that much. In ADP, I think they're about 5 slots different. So I don't think there's that big of a difference between Thielen and Diggs. Thielen obviously slowed down after an amazing first half last season. I'm chalking that up to the injury and nothing else. There are people who have doubt out there that Thielen can get it done at that same pace he did in the first half. I think he's going to be definitely a capable wide receiver one this year, but I'm not willing to put him into the elite company, with the big boys because of the situation in Minnesota. Like I said, I think the defense is going to be better. I think they run the ball more, and he's got Diggs to contend with, fighting for targets. Okay, the next guy, number 9 on my list, is the last guy before you kind of get to your elite wide receivers. But I think this guy could very easily be elite. It wouldn't shock me if he actually finished number 1 this year, and that is Amari Cooper. I have him ranked at number 9. The Dallas Cowboy wide receiver finished 17th last year. Let's see. Unlike other players I'm covering today, Cooper is in an amazing situation. It seems like everybody else has some kind of flaw. Well, Cooper is in a great spot for 2019. The Cowboys have even less talent at wide receiver this year than they did last year. I mean, they still have Tavon Austin, an injured Randall Cobb, somebody named Gallup who caught like 30 balls last year. Who cares? None of those guys matter. Cole Beasley is out of town, and Cooper has been amazing when he's got 8 targets or more. So I broke all these numbers down a little bit earlier. Check this out. Last year, he had 8 games where he had 8 or more targets. In those games, he racked up 880 yards and 7 touchdowns for an average of 21.25 fantasy points per game in a half point per reception format. Okay, just for like a reference here, an average of 21.25 would be good for the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy sports. Okay, so after being traded to the Cowboys last year, he averaged 8.4 targets per game. I actually think that number increases. Let's say it only increases to 9. That would give him 144 targets. If that happens, Amari Cooper will have a career year, and he will definitely have a top 5 fantasy finish. I think Cooper could actually finish this year as number 1. I love Cooper this year. He is being drafted pretty high. I think he's wide receiver 11 right now on ESPN. I didn't write it in my notes for whatever reason. But yeah, he's up there. So if you want him, you have to go out and get him. You don't have to draft him with those top guys, the Jujus, the Hopkins, the Adams, but you got to pick him up pretty quick. He's going in about the 3rd round in most fantasy formats. So Amari Cooper is a guy that I absolutely love. I think he has huge upside. The Cowboys just simply don't have any other options, and he should be a stud this year in fantasy. All right, that's the whole list for today. Tomorrow, we're going to be breaking down kind of the bottom end of my elite guys. It might be a little shocking to see who I have as my top 4 and who I do not. We're going to break down wide receivers 5 through 8 tomorrow. And of course, we'll cover all the other fantasy news that happens overnight. Wow, there is a very low helicopter flying by my house. Hopefully, I'm not being arrested for anything crazy. I think I'll be all right. Anyway, that's it for today's show. We are the Daily Fantasy 5, bringing you the 5 things you need to know every day in the world of fantasy sports. Please check out our sponsor, www.mathradio.com. Please subscribe on YouTube and give us a like and a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify. Talk to you tomorrow.